Welcome back, America. I want to continue on this topic. Honestly, if I don't do it, nobody's going to do it, so I'm doing it. We have a great guest in Congressman Lee Zeldin. Let me tell you a little bit about Congressman Lee Zeldin. He sits on the Foreign Affairs Committee with Omar, as a matter of fact. He served 4 years in the Army on active duty. During the time he served, including as military intelligence officer, prosecutor, military magistrate, while assigned to the Army's elite 82nd Airborne Division. In the summer of 2006, Congressman Zeldin was deployed to Tikrit, Iraq, with an infantry battalion of fellow paratroopers in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. You're a great patriot and hero, Congressman. I know you've announced that you're running in the Republican primary for governor of New York. And let's focus a moment on New York. We saw something a few weeks ago that was utterly shocking. As the terrorists in the Gaza Strip, Hamas, were firing missiles into Israel, and Israel was defending itself. You had individuals with Palestinian flags chasing down Orthodox Jews in trucks in a parking lot. You had the so-called Diamond District under attack by dozens of thugs who were attacking Jews randomly on the street. You could see in Los Angeles, the swastika was being painted on synagogues, and that Jewish community has been under attack, both by Black Lives Matter and a few weeks ago. What do you make of all this, Congressman?
It was sickening to watch, and I'm in New York. I represent a congressional district in New York. I'm Jewish, and I am a strong backer of religious freedom here in the United States and all around the world. You saw men and women being attacked because they were Jewish. It was raw, violent hate. Here in New York, it's a consequence of not just the rise of anti-Semitism, but elected officials in New York City and Albany turning their backs on law enforcement. They support the defund the police movement in New York City, where last year they took out over $1 billion from New York City's budget for the NYPD. They got rid of bail, where now people are getting released in the same day. It's not that they're fearful that they're going to get caught. They know they're going to get caught, but they're confident that after they do get caught, they'll be released again. It's a convergence of a number of forces. NYPD now, morale low, retirement packets surging, suicides increasing, and you end up left with innocent men and women of different backgrounds. We saw other communities under attack, but as you point out, most recently with the Jewish community, and law enforcement doesn't have their back the way that they want to. It's a sickening erosion of public safety and raw hate that is hurting people physically, and it's coming without consequences.
You know, the Attorney General, I mentioned this early in the program with Zuhdi Jasser, had this big press conference. He calls in the media, and he wants it to be a sterling, iconic moment where he says, we have domestic terrorism going on in this country, that we're going to increase our resources and focus on it. He compares himself to Robert Kennedy in the early 60s, and he talks about white supremacy. But he never once talked about the fact that the FBI statistics show that when it comes to religious hate crimes, overwhelmingly, almost 60% are against Jews. And he doesn't mention exactly who it is that is involved in these hate crimes against Jews. I'm no fan of neo-Nazis and Klansmen. As a matter of fact, if we can wipe them out, that's fine by me. But it's not Klansmen and neo-Nazis in the Deep South. It's other people who are doing this to Orthodox Jews in particular in your state, and especially in Brooklyn, New York. But he didn't mention it. He certainly didn't emphasize it. What do you make of that? Does that concern you?
Greatly concerning, because it's about fitting political narratives. It's about domestic politics and inconveniently avoiding truths. And it's unfortunate when we're trying to tackle a problem and people who should be part of the solution can't even identify what exactly the problem is. And we've seen this in the halls of Congress with members like Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, and others who empower them, others who are close to politics, people like Linda Sarsour and others who influence people who are members, and all across the entire country, there are others who promote the BDS movement and raw anti-Semitic hate. And if we're going to actually do something about it, you can't be silent. You can't cower to it. Because if you're silent, what happens with these individuals in this movement is that they become elevated, they're empowered. In a way, you can embrace them through silence, where really what you should be doing is identifying it, confronting it, and crushing it. And that first piece, in order to confront and crush it, is to identify the threat. This isn't new. I remember towards the end of the time of Barack Obama's period in the White House, there was an issue with Democrats identifying radical Islamic extremism as being a threat. Fast forward to today, they're unwilling to identify what is causing these violent attacks, so you can't confront it and crush it. You're willing to identify it. I'm willing to identify it. But when you have people who are part of the Department of Justice, the FBI, and they're not willing to call it balls and strikes accurately, as a consequence, you end up elevating in power, embracing it, and people actually get hurt as a result of it.
Congressman Lee Zeldin, you know, I see a fusion of these radical Marxist movements, a fusion of anti-Semitism with some of the radical Muslim movements and people in the House that we've talked about, among others. And all this action really is in the Democrat Party, or it's on the fringes of the Democrat Party. I hear nothing from Biden. I hear nothing from your senator, who, like us, is Jewish, Schumer. I hear nothing from your Speaker of the House. In other words, the Democrat Party is either appeasing this movement or these movements or embracing them. What do you want to say to these so-called leaders?
Leader, get out of the way. I mean, Pelosi, Hoyer, and Clyburn, the top three in the House, have been serving there now in the House of Representatives for over 104 years. I mean, it's time to move on. If you're not willing to lead when you're confronted with people like Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, and they're pushing anti-American propaganda, if you're going to tolerate it, well, it's time to move on. We don't care about your power, your prestige, your perks, as if that is the reason why we are all living here in your world. We care deeply about our country. I still serve to this day in the Army Reserve. I'm a lieutenant colonel. It's an honor to wear our nation's uniform. I'm surrounded by people who believe in a cause greater than themselves. There are individuals who come to Congress because they love our Constitution, our freedoms and liberties. There are people who serve in our armed forces, willing to give their lives to defend it. And because Nancy Pelosi wants to be the Speaker of the House, she likes the feeling of that gavel in her hand. She likes to be in control. Even though she's been there as long as she's been there, she's still there. She's still holding on to her power. And she's gone out of her way to say she is not rebuking Ilhan Omar for equivocations, trying to draw equivalencies between the United States, Israel, and Hamas and the Taliban. I mean, Ilhan Omar shouldn't have been pointed to the House Foreign Affairs Committee in the first place. I was the first person to speak out against it when she got to Congress. I was on your show right here 3 years ago, almost to the day. We had then House member Ron DeSantis. How much things have changed since June of 2018. And we were talking about foreign policy. Ilhan Omar gets elected to the House. Rashida Tlaib gets elected to the House. Pelosi becomes Speaker again. And when you have someone who is willing to blame U.S. foreign policy for the al-Shabaab attack in Kenya, blame U.S. foreign policy for the suffering of the Venezuelan people instead of blaming Maduro, and all of the anti-Israel, anti-Semitic hate, requesting leniency for ISIS fighters, saying that on 9/11 some people did something, and most recently the equivalency I just drew, you shouldn't be serving on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and it says a lot about Nancy Pelosi and her people that they have no problem with this. And Eric Swalwell gets to serve on the House Intelligence Committee despite the background on him. Where's the accountability? It's about double standards, it's about moral equivalencies and slippery slopes. And if there's something that needs to be confronted with anti-Semitism, they won't singularly, emphatically, unequivocally, and forcefully go after anti-Semitism. Instead, they have to draw up all hate matters resolutions and draw equivalencies to other religions and backgrounds and hate. But meanwhile, when it's those other forms of hate, they'll go after it singularly. Meanwhile, people like, they'll say, Steve King can't serve on any House committees. They'll say that Marjorie Taylor Greene can't serve on any House committees. If you want to go there, if that's where your standard is, how the heck does Ilhan Omar get appointed and stay on the House Foreign Affairs Committee? I'm on 2 committees in the House, Financial Services and Foreign Affairs. I'm with Maxine Waters and Al Green and Rashida Tlaib and AOC and others on Financial Services, and I'm with Omar on Foreign Affairs. And I'm saddened about this moment we're in right now, but I'm also encouraged that as long as all of your viewers are doubling down and tripling down for their passion, their principles and beliefs to do something about it, we can correct this November 8, 2022. We have to, for sake of our great country.
Very well said. And it's amazing that Joe Biden has decided he wants to be the civil rights president. And the greatest civil rights issue of our time has nothing to do with what he's talking about, critical race theory. That is a racist, anti-American, Marxist theory. No, right in front of his face, he sees what's been taking place in this country. He wants it to be the Klan and the neo-Nazis. And as I've said 1,000 times before, crush them. Who's stopping you? Go get them. Get them. Crush them. But what's happening in our streets, Joe Biden's either silent or passively supportive. And he's the president of the United States. He's in charge of his party. And it is a damn shame. What a disgrace.